The chandeliers cast a golden glow over the extravagant ballroom, illuminating the sea of elegantly dressed guests. I stood beside Ethan, his hand resting lightly on my waist, a gesture that to anyone watching spoke of a devoted husband. But we both knew the truth behind our carefully curated smiles. Ethan didn't love me, and I certainly didn't love him. We were merely playing our roles, the perfect married couple for the sake of appearances. I lifted my champagne flute to my lips, my gaze sweeping across the room. Every corner was filled with the city's elite, business moguls, socialites, and politicians, all indulging in the illusion of perfection just as I was. My dress, a striking crimson piece that clung to my curves, left little to the imagination. The high slit running up my thigh ensured that I caught the attention of more than a few wandering eyes. "You look breathtaking tonight," Ethan murmured into my ear, his lips barely grazing my skin. His voice held the perfect amount of warmth, enough to convince anyone within earshot of his affection. But I knew better. I turned my head slightly, offering him a knowing smirk. "And you play the role of a devoted husband so well," I teased, letting my fingers brush against his chest for show. He chuckled, the sound deep and rich. "We both have our talents, darling." A waiter passed by, offering me another glass of champagne. I accepted it with a polite nod, my fingers trailing along the delicate stem. As I took a slow sip, my gaze caught on someone across the room. A man, tall, sharp-jawed, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that did nothing to hide the strength of his body. He exuded an effortless confidence, the kind that made the air shift around him. He was speaking to someone, but his dark eyes flicked to mine, locking onto me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Something about him unsettled me, excited me. I exhaled softly, tearing my gaze away, but I felt him watching. And suddenly, the warmth of Ethan's hand on my waist felt suffocating. The night stretched on, filled with empty conversations and hollow laughter. Ethan and I danced, twirling across the polished marble floor as our guests admired us. The perfect couple, a man and a woman bound by vows that meant nothing. But even as I moved in Ethan's arms, my thoughts were elsewhere. On the stranger with the dark eyes. On the way he looked at me. It wasn't long before I felt the weight of his presence near me. I turned and there he was. Enjoying the party? His voice was smooth, laced with amusement. I tilted my head, letting my lips curl into a teasing smile. "I suppose that depends. Are you planning to make it more interesting?" His lips quirked. "That depends. Do you want me to?" I took a slow sip of my champagne, letting the bubbles dance on my tongue before I answered. "Maybe." He leaned in just slightly, enough that I caught the faint scent of his cologne, woodsy, with a hint of something darker. "Then let's make this night one to remember." Ethan was nowhere in sight, and for the first time in a long time I felt something real. The night air was thick with anticipation as I stepped onto the balcony, the cool breeze a welcome contrast to the heat that had settled in my chest. Below me the city stretched out endlessly, glowing like a sea of gold and silver. But none of it mattered. Not when my mind was still reeling from the presence of the man inside. Lucas, the way he had looked at me, like I was something worth unraveling, had sent a thrill through me that I hadn't felt in years. It was dangerous, intoxicating, and yet I had let myself indulge in it. I took a slow sip of my champagne, the bubbles dancing on my tongue, as I tried to steady myself. But then I felt him before I even saw him. The shift in the air, the weight of his gaze. Turned, and there he was. Lucas leaned casually against the doorframe, watching me with a knowing smirk. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with a confidence that wasn't forced. It was effortless, as if he knew exactly the effect he had on people. "You left the party," he murmured, stepping closer. His voice was smooth, low, laced with amusement. I tilted my head, my lips curving slightly. "And you followed me." He chuckled, slow and deep. I was curious. I arched a brow. "About?" He stopped a mere breath away, close enough that I could see the sharp angles of his jaw, the dark intensity in his eyes. "Why a woman like you looks like she wants to be anywhere but in there." His words sent a shiver down my spine. He was perceptive, dangerous. I swirled my glass lazily, pretending to be unaffected. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending. Lucas studied me, his gaze flicking over my face, as if peeling back my layers one by one. And what exactly are you pretending? I hesitated. Then I answered honestly. That I'm happy. The admission hung between us, heavy and real. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Lucas's fingers brushed against my wrist, light, teasing, but enough to make my breath hitch. I don't believe in pretending, he said, his voice quieter now rougher. I believe in taking what you want. His touch lingered, just a whisper of warmth against my skin, but it set fire to something deep inside me. I should have stepped back. I should have reminded myself that I was married, that this was dangerous. But I didn't move. Instead I whispered, "And what do you want, Lucas?" His eyes darkened. "You." The word sent a sharp thrill straight through me. His hand came up, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering against my cheek. "Tell me to stop." I parted my lips, but nothing came out. I didn't want him to stop. Lucas took my silence as permission. The next thing I knew, his lips were on mine. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was demanding, consuming. His mouth moving against mine like he had waited too long for this moment. His hand slid to my waist, gripping me tightly, pulling me flush against his body. A soft gasp escaped me as I felt the heat of him, the hard lines of his body pressing against my curves. His tongue flicked against mine, teasing, coaxing, and I melted into him, my fingers tangling in his dark hair. The railing dug into my back, but I didn't care. All I cared about was the way he made me feel alive. Wanted. Lucas broke the kiss just enough to whisper against my lips, "You taste like champagne." I let out a breathless laugh. "You taste like trouble." His grip on my waist tightened. The best kind. And then his lips were on my neck, trailing fire along my skin. I arched into him, my head tipping back, giving him more access. His teeth grazed my pulse point and I shuddered. God, it had been so long since I had felt like this. Since I had felt anything. His hands roamed lower, fingers pressing into my hips, inching dangerously close to the slit of my dress. I knew I should stop this. I knew that once we crossed this line there would be no going back. But I didn't want to stop. Lucas's mouth found mine again, and this time I kissed him back harder, all restraint slipping away. He groaned against my lips, one hand gripping my thigh, sliding up the exposed skin. "Come with me," he murmured, his breath hot against my mouth. I hesitated for only a second. Then I took his hand and led him inside. The hallway leading to my suite felt endless, every step amplifying the pulse between my legs, the anticipation coiling tighter in my stomach. Lucas was close behind me, his fingers brushing against my lower back, his touch searing even through the fabric of my dress. By the time we reached the door, my hands trembled as I fumbled for the keycard. Lucas leaned in, his lips grazing the shell of my ear. Nervous. I exhaled a shaky breath. "No." "A lie." He smirked. As if he knew. As if he could feel the way my body responded to him. The moment I swiped the keycard and the lock clicked open, Lucas pushed inside, pulling me in with him. The door barely shut before his mouth was on mine again, hungrier this time. His hands gripped my waist, lifting me effortlessly, and I wrapped my legs around him as he pressed me against the wall. His lips trailed down my throat, his teeth scraping against my collarbone. I gasped, my nails digging into his shoulders as his fingers found the zipper of my dress, dragging it down with agonizing slowness. The fabric pooled at my feet, leaving me in nothing but lace. Lucas pulled back just enough to look at me, his gaze dark, heated. "Fuck, Sophia." I smirked, sliding my hands down his chest, feeling the muscles tense beneath my touch. "Are you just going to stand there and admire? Or are you going to do something about it?" A low growl rumbled in his chest. "Oh, sweetheart." And then he had me pinned against the bed. What happened next was a blur of heat and desperation. His hands explored every inch of me, his mouth leaving a trail of fire along my skin. Clothes disappeared. Moans filled the air. And when he finally pushed inside me, stretching me, filling me, I forgot everything but the way he felt, the way he made me feel. Alive. Desired. Real. I clung to him as he moved, slow at first, teasing, then faster, deeper, until the pleasure built to an unbearable peak. When I came apart beneath him, crying out his name, I knew I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. The morning after was a cruel contrast to the heat of the night before. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden rays across the tangled sheets and my bare skin. For a moment I lay still, my body sore in the most delicious ways, my mind foggy from the pleasure Lucas had given me. Then reality crashed in. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to feel this. Panic licked up my spine as I turned my head, finding Lucas lying beside me, his face relaxed in sleep. He looked different like this, softer, younger. His dark lashes fanned over his cheeks, his lips slightly parted, the evidence of last night still visible in the faint red marks I had left on his skin. I should leave before he wakes up. I carefully shifted, peeling his arm off my waist inch by inch. But just as I slid one foot off the bed, a strong hand clamped around my wrist. Running already? Lucas's voice was thick with sleep, but there was amusement in his tone. I sucked in a sharp breath. I need to go. His grip tightened slightly. You don't have to. I turned to face him, my pulse racing. Yes, I do. Lucas studied me, his sharp eyes taking in every flicker of hesitation on my face. Then he smirked lazily and dragged me back against him. My body collided with his, my bare skin brushing against his warmth. Last night wasn't enough for you? He murmured, his lips ghosting over my jaw, down the column of my neck. I bit my lip, trying to suppress the shiver that ran through me. Lucas, he hummed, his mouth finding my shoulder, his teeth grazing my skin just enough to make me gasp. Say you want me to stop and I will. I couldn't say it, because it would be a lie. His fingers trailed down my spine, slow, deliberate, before gripping my hips and pulling me against him. I felt him, already hard, already wanting. A dangerous temptation. A temptation I couldn't afford to give in to again. With a strength I didn't know I had, I pushed away from him and stumbled out of bed, grabbing the first piece of clothing I could find, his shirt. I tugged it over my head, the fabric swallowing me whole. But at least it covered the evidence of what we had done. Lucas propped himself up on his elbows, his gaze dark with something unreadable as he watched me. You regret it? It wasn't a question. I swallowed hard, turning away. I can't afford to regret it. Silence stretched between us. Then, he sighed. Because of your husband? My chest tightened at the word. It sounded foreign now, like it belonged to someone else. I took a shaky breath. Because of everything. Lucas was quiet for a moment, then he murmured, You're not happy, Sophia. His words hit me harder than I expected. I gripped the edge of the dresser, my nails digging into the wood. That doesn't matter, doesn't it? He stood, completely unbothered by his nakedness, his presence commanding even in the stillness of the morning. Is that why you let me fuck you like you've been starving for something real? My breath caught. Because he was right. I had been starving. For passion. For desire. For something more than the cold, empty marriage I had built around myself. But admitting it meant facing the truth. And I wasn't ready for that. So I turned, forcing a smirk. It was just sex, Lucas. His jaw ticked, his expression darkening. You and I both know that's a lie. I met his gaze, willing myself to be unaffected. Believe what you want. Then, before he could say another word, I grabbed my things and walked out the door, leaving behind the one thing I knew I shouldn't want, but already craving more. The penthouse was empty when I arrived home, the silence almost suffocating. Dewey was gone as expected. Our marriage was nothing more than a business arrangement, and he spent most of his time away, ensuring that our separate lives never collided. And yet, the moment I stepped inside, I felt exposed, as if the walls knew my betrayal, as if the air carried the scent of another man. I moved through the space mechanically, shedding Lucas's shirt and stepping into the shower. I scrubbed my skin raw, but no amount of water could wash away the memory of last night, of the way he had touched me, the way he had made me feel. When I emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a silk robe, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Did you enjoy my brother? My breath hitched. I stared at the message, my mind racing. My brother? The pieces clicked together in an instant. Dewey. No. No, it wasn't possible. I had thought my husband's affairs were nothing more than well-hidden secrets, whispers in the dark that never reached the surface. But this was something else. This was personal. Before I could fully process it, another message came through. Meet me tonight. We have a lot to discuss. A location followed. I hesitated. I should ignore it. I should delete the message and pretend I never saw it. But deep down, I knew that wasn't an option. Because for the first time since this marriage began, I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. And I needed to know the truth. The bar was dimly lit. The kind of place where people went to disappear. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of whiskey. The low hum of conversation buzzing around me. I spotted him immediately. Nathaniel, Dewey's lover. Lucas's brother. He sat in a secluded booth. His sharp eyes locked onto me the moment I entered. He was handsome in the same effortless way Lucas was, but colder. Calculated. I swallowed hard and forced myself to approach. As I slid into the seat across from him, he smirked. I was starting to think you wouldn't come. I met his gaze head-on. I need answers. He chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Straight to the point. I like that. I didn't react. Why did you text me? Nathaniel leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Because you needed to know. My fingers curled into fists beneath the table. Know what? His smirk widened. That your husband has been fucking me for years. I flinched, the crude words hitting me harder than I expected. Nathaniel watched me carefully, as if gauging my reaction. You didn't suspect? I forced myself to keep my voice steady. I knew there were others. Ah, he mused. But you didn't know it was me. A bitter laugh escaped me. I never thought he'd be that predictable. Nathaniel took a sip of his drink, his eyes gleaming with something dangerous. And yet here we are. I exhaled slowly, trying to regain control. Why tell me now? He leaned back, his smirk fading. Because, sweetheart. He placed his glass down with a soft clink. Your little affair with my brother just made this a lot more interesting. My stomach dropped. He knew. And if he knew, then so did Dewey. I was trapped in a game I didn't even know I was playing. And I was about to lose. The phone on the bedside table buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. A new message from an unknown number. How does it feel to be the fool in this game? A chill ran down my spine. I looked around the luxurious hotel suite. The soft glow of the city lights spilling through the massive windows. The air was still thick with the scent of sweat, sex, and the lingering notes of Lucas's cologne. Beside me he was still asleep. The sheets barely covering his toned body. Red scratches trailing down his back. Marks I had left in the heat of the moment. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone. My heart pounded as I reread the message. Who the hell was this? And what did they mean by this game? I turned toward Lucas, watching the slow, steady rise and fall of his chest. Could it be him? Could this all be some elaborate trap? But as I studied his face, peaceful in sleep, something deep inside me refused to believe that. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, wrapping the silk sheet around me as I stood. The cold air sent goosebumps across my skin, but my mind was too distracted to care. I opened the message app and typed back. Who are you? No reply. Instead, my phone buzzed again, this time a video file. I hesitated before pressing play. The screen lit up with grainy security footage, the timestamp from just a few hours ago. My breath caught in my throat as the video played. It was me and Lucas tangled in each other on this very bed. Our bodies moving in a fevered rhythm. My fingers curled tighter around the phone. My heart thundering in my chest. I felt sick. Someone had been watching us. The video cut to another scene, one that made my blood turn to ice. Nathaniel. He was in a dimly lit room, standing inches away from Dewey, my husband. But it wasn't just the closeness that sent a shiver through me. It was the way Nathaniel touched him. His hand trailed down Dewey's chest, stopping at his waist. Dewey didn't resist. He leaned into the touch. And then, the video ended. I couldn't breathe. Nathaniel, Lucas's brother. The man I had unknowingly been tangled in this twisted game with. And my husband. The sickening realization hit me all at once. Dewey and Nathaniel. Lucas and me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a carefully crafted web, and I was the fool who had walked straight into it. Shit! I whispered, my grip tightening on the phone. My legs felt weak, my head spinning with a million thoughts. Behind me the bed shifted. What's wrong? Lucas's deep, groggy voice broke through my haze. I turned, my pulse still racing. Someone sent me a video. Lucas sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. What video? I handed him the phone, my fingers still trembling. I watched his face as he played it. First, the scene of us together. His jaw tightened. Then, the scene with his brother, his entire body tensed. Son of a bitch, he muttered, tossing the phone onto the bed. I crossed my arms over my chest. Did you know? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Lucas's gaze snapped to mine, dark and unreadable. No, I suspected. But I didn't know. My stomach twisted. How long? He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Years. A bitter laugh escaped me. And you never thought to tell me? Lucas's expression darkened. And what would you have done, Left him? Exposed him? Would it have changed anything? I hated that I didn't have an answer. Lucas pushed out of bed, grabbing his pants and slipping them on. His muscles tensed as he paced the room, his mind clearly racing. Who sent this? I demanded. Lucas shook his head. I don't know. But whoever it is, they have access to things they shouldn't. I swallowed hard. What if they release it? Lucas looked at me then, his blue eyes cold and calculating. Then we make sure they don't. A knock at the hotel door made us both freeze. Lucas grabbed his phone, checking the camera feed outside. His face darkened. It's Nathaniel. Panic surged through me. Do you want to face him? Lucas asked, his voice low. I hesitated. Then with a deep breath I nodded. Lucas unlocked the door. Nathaniel stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over us, his expression unreadable. We need to talk. Lucas's jaw clenched. You think? Nathaniel turned to me. Does she know? Lucas's lips curled into a smirk. Oh, she knows. Nathaniel's shoulders tensed, his usual calm facade slipping for just a second. Then we have a problem. I crossed my arms, my voice cold. You're damn right we do. Nathaniel sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. This isn't what you think. I let out a humorless laugh. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think. Nathaniel's gaze locked onto mine, something like regret flickering in his eyes. It's complicated. Lucas scoffed. No shit. Nathaniel turned to his brother. This isn't the time for sarcasm, Lucas. Lucas stepped closer, his voice deadly calm. Then what time is it, Nate? Time to finally tell the truth. Nathaniel exhaled sharply. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. I shook my head. Then how was it supposed to happen? Nathaniel hesitated. Then finally he spoke. Dwayne married you because he had to. It was never about love. It was about control. About power. And I. His voice faltered. I was a part of it. The room spun. I stared at him, my pulse roaring in my ears. You knew? Nathaniel nodded, his jaw tight. I knew. Lucas's hands curled into fists. You son of a. Nathaniel raised a hand. It's not what you think. Dwayne didn't just marry her for show. He married her to protect himself. There are people, powerful people, who would ruin him if they knew the truth. I felt sick. Nathaniel looked at me then, his eyes searching mine. And now that you know, you're in danger too. Silence filled the room. Lucas was the first to break it. So what do we do? Nathaniel hesitated. Then his next words made my blood run cold. We find out who sent that video before they find you. The room was eerily silent except for the hum of the television. The screen flickered, replaying the leaked video that had shattered everything. I couldn't tear my eyes away, no matter how much it burned. There I was, my body tangled with Adrian's, his hands gripping me, his mouth devouring mine. Every gasp, every moan, every moment of pleasure was there for the world to see. But that wasn't the worst part. The video then cut to Darius, to him and Ethan. Their bodies pressed together in a different kind of passion. One filled with desperation, hidden desires, and years of restraint finally breaking. The world now knew the truth. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My chest ached, my head pounded, and my stomach twisted violently. The internet was on fire, filled with headlines screaming betrayal, scandal, deception. Socialite wife caught in adulterous affair. Billionaire Darius Sinclair's secret lover revealed. The marriage built on lies. I had thought I understood what it meant to live under scrutiny. But this was a storm I wasn't prepared for. A knock at the door made me flinch. My heart hammered against my ribs as I turned. Darius stood there, his face eerily calm. "We need to talk," he said. I let out a dry laugh. "Now? After everything?" He stepped inside, his presence suffocating in the dimly lit room. "I didn't release the video," he said, voice cold. "I don't care who did." I snapped. "The damage is done." Darius studied me for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. "Are you in love with him?" The question hit me like a slap. I had spent years trapped in this lifeless marriage, pretending, lying to myself and everyone else. And then Adrian had come crashing into my world, setting me on fire. But was it love? Or just the desperate need to feel something? "I don't know," I admitted. Darius exhaled, his jaw tightening. "Ethan left." I frowned. "What?" "He saw the video. He left." His voice was empty, hollow. "He said he never wanted to be part of something so filthy." Something sharp twisted inside me. Darius had never loved me, but he had loved Ethan. And now, because of this, he had lost him. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to sympathy for my husband.
"I'm sorry," he whispered.
Darius let out a humorless chuckle. "No, you're not." Maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I turned away, running a hand through my hair. "I'm leaving," I said finally. Darius didn't react. "Where will you go?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I can't stay here." He nodded slowly, as if he had expected this. "I'll handle the divorce quietly." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Quietly? Nothing about this is quiet anymore, Darius." He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Fair point." I hesitated for a moment before turning to him again. "Do you regret it?" Darius met my gaze.
"No."
Neither did I. I grabbed my bag and walked out the door, stepping away from the ruins of the life I had. The city felt different that night. The air was crisp, charged with an energy I couldn't place. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked, aimless and lost. And then I saw him. Adrian stood by his car, hands in his pockets, eyes burning with something dangerous. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. I had to. He stepped closer. "And where are you going?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know." Adrian exhaled slowly. "Come with me." My breath hitched. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But everything was a mess. The world had seen us, our bodies entwined, our sins exposed. "I don't know if this is real," I admitted, voice shaking. "I don't know if you want me, or if you just wanted to ruin him." Something dark flickered in his gaze. "I wanted you before I even knew who you were," he said. "And I still want you now." My heart pounded. Adrian reached for my hand, his fingers threading through mine. "I don't care about the scandal. I don't care about Darius. I care about you." I sucked in a shaky breath. "This won't be easy." His lips curved into a slow, wicked smile. "Nothing worth having ever is." And just like that, I made my choice. I stepped into the unknown. But this time, I wasn't alone.